For our Module 4, we're going to talk about hypotheses and how to make or how to formulate hypotheses. At the end of the video, the learner should be able to define hypothesis, cite the types of hypothesis, and formulate hypothesis. What is hypothesis? I know that this term is very well known. You always encounter this in your science subjects, especially during experiments. Can you define hypothesis? Can you describe this in one word? I'll give you 5 seconds for that. 5 seconds starts now. I'm pretty sure you know that hypothesis is a scientific guess. Okay, let us dig the deeper meaning of hypothesis in this video. Hypothesis shows the relationship between or among two or more variables. What does it mean? Two variables are mentioned. What do you think are those variables? Of course you know it. The independent and the dependent variable. That's correct. In formulating a hypothesis, it is very important that we can see the relationship or what relationship do these two variables have. Let us see this example. There is no significant difference between the effectiveness of Mabolo and the commercial ones in terms of flammability and volatility. We can see the underlined words Mabolo and flammability and volatility. These are the two variables where we can see that there is a relationship. How can Mabolo affects the flammability and volatility of a certain product, which is the ethanol? Now, let us see the flow of the figure here. In this flow chart, we can see a hypothesis with statistical treatment, going to accept or reject, and then conclusion. As we can see, this flow chart shows that hypothesis can serve as a guide in searching for a conclusion. Through our hypothesis, we can use statistical treatment whether we accept or reject our hypothesis so that we can arrive with a valid and conclusive result which will lead us to a conclusion. So our number 2 definition of hypothesis, it serves as the guide in search for a conclusion. Next question, what are the two forms of statistical hypothesis? We have two types or two forms of hypothesis, and these are the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Based from your own schema, can you state the difference between the two? What is the difference between null and alternative hypothesis? Let's take a look at this. With our title, the effectiveness of Mabolo fruit as an alternative source for ethanol. For the specific objective, we have to compare the effectiveness of Mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Always remember that in formulating a hypothesis, it should be aligned with your specific objectives. You can formulate your hypothesis through the guide and through the help of your specific objective. Okay, let's have two examples. Okay, hypothesis 1. There is no significant difference between the effectiveness of Mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Second hypothesis. There is a significant difference between the effectiveness of Mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Between the two, which do you think is the null hypothesis and which one is the alternative? I will give you 5 seconds to think. 5 seconds starts now. Okay, time's up. Let's check. Okay, hypothesis 1 is the null hypothesis and the second one is the alternative hypothesis. Okay, did you get the right answer? Based from our example, can you now state the difference between the two? Let's talk about first the null hypothesis. What do you know about null hypothesis? When we say null hypothesis, it is denoted by the symbol HO. It is a type of hypothesis used in statistics that proposes that no statistical significance exists in a set of given observations. Again, I'll repeat. There is no statistical significance exists. The null hypothesis attempts to show that no variation exists between variables or that a single variable is no different than its mean. It is presumed that to be true until statistical evidence nullifies it for an alternative hypothesis. In our example, there is no significant difference between the effectiveness of mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Take note of the highlighted words, no significant difference. No significant means that no variation exists between mabolo and the control group, meaning to say, mabolo fruit and the control group has the same. They are only the same. Now, let's talk about alternative hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis is denoted by the symbol HI or HA. It is a type of hypothesis used in statistics that proposes that there is a statistical significance exists in a set of given observations. Remember, there is a statistical significance exists, meaning to say, it reflects that there will be an observed effect for our experiment. In a mathematical formulation of an alternative hypothesis, there will be typically an inequality or not equal to symbol. This hypothesis is denoted by either HA or HI, like what I've said. The alternative hypothesis is what we are attempting to demonstrate in an indirect way by the use of our hypothesis test. If the null hypothesis is rejected, then we accept the alternative hypothesis. If the null hypothesis is not rejected, then we do not accept the alternative hypothesis. In our example, we have there is a significant difference between the effectiveness of mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Take note of the highlighted words. A significant difference, meaning to say there is a difference exists between the two variables which are mabolo fruit and the control group. Because there is a significant difference, meaning to say the effectiveness of mabolo fruit and the control group has different effect. Let's have different examples here. Number 1. The intelligence of girls is the same as the intelligence of boys. What type of hypothesis is this? If your answer is null hypothesis, then you are correct. From the word same as, meaning to say, no difference exists in this statement. Always remember that if it is null hypothesis, no variation exists between the variables or that a single variable is no different than its mean. Meaning to say, there is a same level of intelligence between girls and boys. The same. Okay, let us proceed with number 2. The use of serpentina leaves for lowering the blood sugar level is as effective as using the commercialized one. Is it null or alternative? If your answer is null, then you are right again. The word is as effective means no significant difference exists again. They are just the same because there is no significant. Number 3. There is a difference between the intelligence of girls and boys. What is your answer? Is it null or alternative? Since there is a difference between intelligence of girls and boys, meaning to say, this is not a null hypothesis, but rather an alternative hypothesis because we can see the difference between the two. How about number 4? There is a significant difference in the use of serpentina leaves and the commercialized one in lowering the blood sugar level. Is it the same as number 3? Is it also alternative hypothesis? Of course, yes. What makes you think that it is an alternative hypothesis? Okay, because of the word, there is a significant difference. There is a significant difference, meaning to say, they're not the same. There is a difference between the two variables, which are Serpentina and the commercialized one. Very good. Is it clear to you? Do you have any questions? Let us proceed with the types of alternative hypothesis. Yes, you heard it right. There are types of alternative hypothesis. These are the two types of alternative hypothesis: directional and non-directional hypothesis. But before we discuss it, I will give you first different examples of alternative hypothesis. Let us have these two examples. First, there is a significant difference between the effectiveness of trompang elepante to the control group in terms of rate of inhibition. Second example, trompang elepante is more effective to use than the control group in terms of rate of inhibition. Both of these are alternative. In the first example, it was stated that there is a significant difference. In the second example, it was stated that trompang elepante is more effective than the control group, meaning to say there is also a difference. Now, which one is directional and which one is non-directional? I will give you 5 seconds to think. Did you answer it correctly? Let's talk about directional alternative hypothesis. A directional alternative hypothesis is a type of hypothesis used in statistics that proposes that there is a statistical significance exists in a set of given observations. Example, Mabolo fruit is better than the control group as an alternative source of ethanol in terms of flammability. In contrast of the non-directional alternative hypothesis, a directional alternative hypothesis specifies the direction of the tested relationship, stating that one variable is predicted to be larger or smaller than null value. So in our example, Mabolo fruit is better than the control group. Between Mabolo fruit and the control group, we can specify that Mabolo is better than the control group. But instead of by just saying there is a difference between Mabolo and the control group, we stated that Mabolo fruit is better than the control group. That is the meaning of directional alternative hypothesis. We are predicting that there is better between the two variables. Now let's have the non-directional alternative hypothesis. A test of non-directional alternative hypothesis does not state the direction of the difference. It indicates only the difference exists. Example, there is a significant difference between the effectiveness of Mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control group in terms of flammability. Take note of the word, there is a significant difference. We know that there is difference between Mabolo fruit and the control group, between the two variables. We know that there is a difference, but we do not know what exactly is the difference between the two. The reason why it is non-directional, we are only indicating that difference between the two variables exists, but we are not saying which one is effective or not. A test of a non-directional alternative hypothesis does not state the direction of the difference. Again, it only indicates only the difference between the two variables. It indicates only the difference exists. Non-directional alternative hypothesis is a type of alternative hypothesis used in statistical significance testing. For a research question, two rival hypotheses are formed. Now, I will give you different examples of alternative hypothesis, then you classify it. Let's have number 1. There is a significant difference between the effectiveness of trompang elepante to the control group in terms of rate of inhibition. Is it directional or non-directional? I'll give you 2 seconds for that. If your answer is non-directional, then you are correct. Next, number 2. The use of aratilis fruit is more effective in making ethanol in terms of flammability than the commercialized one. Is it non-directional or directional alternative hypothesis? I'll give you 2 seconds to think. If your answer is directional, then you are correct. Next, third example. Serpentino leaves is as effective as the commercialized medicine in lowering the blood sugar level of type 2 diabetes. Is it non-directional or directional? Again, I'll give you 2 seconds to think of the answer. If your answer is non-directional hypothesis, then you got it right. Congratulations! What are the characteristics of a good hypothesis? I have this example. If I give a plant an unlimited amount of sunlight, then the plant will grow to its largest possible size. What have you noticed? We have if and we have then. What do you think is a characteristic of this hypothesis? Okay, number 1 characteristic is it may be expressed in terms of cause and effect. The reason why there is a relationship between 2 variables in making hypothesis. Next, through analysis of variance, ANOVA, the researchers were able to conclude that there is no significant difference between the capacity of the biofuel that of commercial fuels in terms of their length of consumption and pH. Based from this example, what do you think is the characteristic of a good hypothesis? Number 2 characteristic, there must have a valid and acceptable conclusion that could be drawn using the appropriate statistical treatment. How about this one? To test the significant difference between the effectiveness of mabolo fruit extract to the commercialized ones in terms of flammability and volatility, then it goes with a hypothesis like this. There is no significant difference between the effectiveness of mabolo fruit extract to the commercialized ones in terms of flammability and volatility. What do you think is the characteristic of a good hypothesis for this? Third characteristic, it must be formulated based on specific objectives raised in the study. Again, it must be aligned with the specific objectives. Now, since you already know what hypothesis is and what are the types or forms of hypothesis, it's time to take a quiz. Be ready, students. For the direction, classify whether it is null or alternative hypothesis. If it is alternative, then tell whether it is directional or non-directional. Get 1/2 crosswise and answer it on your paper. Number 1. There is no significant difference in the amount of heavy metals reduced from fish pond water among the different concentrations of applied alginates by measuring its conductivity. Next, number 2. There is a significant effect on the quality of the fish pond water among the different concentrations of applied alginates in terms of its pH level. Next, number 3. There is no significant effect on the quality of the fish pond water among the different concentrations of applied alginates in terms of its pH level. Okay, number 4. Setup B with 75% of serpentina extract and 25% of water is more effective in lowering the blood sugar level than in setup D with 25% serpentina extract and 75% water. Number 5. There is no significant difference between the serpentina leaves supplemental tea and the positive control in terms of the effectiveness in lowering the blood sugar level of albino rats. Number 6. The serpentina leaves extract is more effective than the commercialized supplemental tea in lowering the blood sugar level. Number 7. Grade 10 students are better in using social media than grade 7 students. Number 8. There is no significant difference between fighters' non-autonomous mode and the controlled setup's non-autonomous mode in terms of a 180-degree counterclockwise rotation time. Number 9. There is a significant difference between fighters' non-autonomous mode and the control group or controlled setup's non-autonomous mode in terms of 360-degree clockwise rotation time. Last number, fighters' non-autonomous mode is better than the control setup in terms of extinguishing time.